Fire ecology is studying the causes and the dynamics, meaning like how it works and how it changes, and the consequences of fire in our landscapes. These days, I think it's not hard to explain why it matters. I live in Wisconsin. We've just had a week's worth of smoke and hazardous air because of all of the wildfires burning in the forests in Canada. So I think people are realizing that fire has important consequences, not only for the forests, but also for the places where we live. In terms of a forest, which is what I study here in Yellowstone, fire is a really important natural process that can renew the forests. It kills trees, but it also renews the forests. It gives us a mosaic of ages and of different forest species across the landscape. So it's one of the really important drivers of the forests that we see. And right now, it's of a lot of importance because with the warming of the climate, since climate is an important component driving fires, we're seeing changes in the way that fire acts in our landscape. For most of the 20th century, we did not have a lot of fire in Yellowstone. And we do know that over the past 10,000 years, that fires that are intense enough to kill the trees and regenerate a new stand of trees, that those high-intensity fires happened at intervals of about 100 to 300 years. And they occurred during times when the climate was especially dry. And then we had the 1988 fires in the latter part of the 20th century, during a summer that was exceptionally dry and windy. And so we had those conditions that allow for a big fire to burn. So those fires were very large. They were the largest we had seen in the 20th century. In terms of recent history, even throughout the West, they were massive in terms of size and severity and the lack of control, very similar to the fires that we're seeing in the past 10 years or so in other areas throughout the West. And so oftentimes people refer to the 1988 fires as the event or the fires that ushered in the new era of fire activity in the western United States. In the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, it's perfectly natural to have infrequent, meaning every 100 to 300 years, fires of high severity. So they kill the trees. The species here are adapted to it, and they're adapted to regenerate after those fires. And so one of the points associated with that is that big fires like occurred in 1988 or 2016 are not the result of an unnatural buildup of fuels, say by historical fire suppression. They really result from the climate conditions just not being hot and dry very frequently. There's always plenty of fuel to burn on this landscape. It's different in other forest types, especially in the Southwest or in the Badlands, for example, or the lower Sierra Nevada. In ponderosa pine systems, it's hotter and drier in general. The trees have thick bark when they're grown up, and so when a low severity fire just burns along the understory, it doesn't kill the adult trees, but it thins things out. And those systems are not adapted to the high severity fires, and they were also easy to put out. So in those areas, there are many locations where suppressing those low ground fires led to an unnatural buildup of fuel. And so that role is much more important in other forest types. But here in Yellowstone, it's really the climate conditions that are driving the fires. One of the challenges of studying forests is that they take a long time to grow. I mean, I've been studying the Yellowstone 88 fires for 35 years, but it takes a century or two before the full forest matures. So as we think about what will play out during the 21st century or beyond, we can't just wait decades to find out. And so one of our approaches has been to try to think about the mechanisms that lead to the successful recovery of the forest, like it's done for 10,000 years, or what kinds of changes might lead to the forest the trees not being able to recover from fire. So there's several factors that we have focused on and demonstrated. One of them is if the fire comes back before the trees have been able to produce cones, there's just not a seed source. And so the trees burn, but you just don't even have any serotinous cones. You may not have any cones at all. So you have no seeds right there. And then if the fire is very severe, it could combust all the seeds, and so you get a reduction in the amount of viable seed because many of them are gone. And then if you don't have those seeds located on site and the fire is really big, you might not have seeds from surviving live trees that didn't burn in that fire be able to disperse into the middle of the burned area. And that's another factor that we saw happen in the short interval fires, the maple fire and the berry fire of 2016, because the forests surrounding them were young and short. And so they both didn't have very many cones, but they're also really short. So even if a seed is released, it only went about 2 to 3 meters. It didn't go out to the middle of the burned patch. So all of those factors have to do with how the changes in the size and the frequency and the intensity or severity of the fires can influence the ability of the forest to rebound. And that window is absolutely critical, because if you don't get the forest recovery after the disturbances, you don't get the forest. Although these landscapes change, they've changed in the past and they'll change in the future, the rate of change that's happening now is well beyond that we've seen over millennia. And so I hope that people will understand the consequences for a place like Yellowstone that we love, and I hope that maybe it will prompt some action to curtail the rate of climate change.